Hello all, and welcome to the webinar. Per the title of this webinar, it's starting to happen, the recovery that we've all been waiting for. Of course, it depends where in the world you are and what type of market you serve, but it appears to be underway, nevertheless, in some form. I was reading a report recently from our friends over at Calibri Labs. This was on specifically the US market. And you could say that the good news is, of course, that year-over-year numbers are great, considering that, of course, a year ago, everything was closed down. But, you know, still, nevertheless, occupancy is still creeping up, and ADR is actually gaining traction better than occupancy, which is interesting. Certain markets are certainly doing better than other markets. Rural markets, small towns, and resorts are doing much better than large city areas. This impact on the large metropolitan areas is probably caused by a lack of business travel, which looks to be making a slower recovery as businesses maybe have become conditioned to meet remotely, not unlike this. Regardless, month-over-month data over the last few months shows that guests are indeed coming. And of course, that begs the question, are we ready as hoteliers? It's not news to anyone that hiring workers in hospitality is currently very difficult. This is, you hear it about the restaurants, but it's also true for hotels as well. We have a bit of a labor problem on our hands across the board. That makes efficiency and gathering of ancillary guest revenue kind of hard to come by. The good news is that while hotels have been shut down, the hotel technology companies, especially PMS companies, have not been. They've kept on working on ways to improve the health of their hotel customers. So today we once again have 5 PMS companies who are geared up to talk to us about how PMS technology can help your hotel deal with the challenge of making up revenue and serving guests when you might be understaffed. Now, I'd like to go around the table and ask all of our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into it. So I'm going to start today with Jas, our one non-PMS panelist.
Thanks, Paul. My name is Schaap. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ROOMDEX, company we founded last year, April, just when COVID got underway. We focus on room upgrades, early arrival, late departure upsell, and other upsell components around the travel guest journey. And that'll be me.
Thank you, Jas. Michael Schubach, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, good morning. I'm Michael Schubach. I'm Vice President of Product Management for the Hospitality Division of Infor. Infor is property management systems, revenue management systems, point of sale, sales and catering, and we have a global practice.
Thanks, Michael. Michael Heflin, can you give us a quick introduction, please?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Paul. Michael Heflin, as mentioned, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at StayNTouch. I'm excited for the discussion this morning. Certainly good timing. A lot going on in the industry, and nice to be a part of a panel with this many great minds. So thank you, guys.
Thanks very much, Michael. We have Ingo. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, guys, first for inviting me to this webinar, and thank you all for joining today. I'm Ingo Dignas, co-founder and CEO at Protel, and I hope you all know what Protel does.
Thank you, Ingo. Uli, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Good day, everybody from Munich and Germany. We are apaleo, a Munich-based company that has developed a next-generation platform for the hotel industry.
Excellent, Uli. Thank you. And last but not least, Richard Valtr, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone, and thanks to Jas and Paul for inviting me. So I'm Richard Valtr. I'm the founder of Mews. That aims to streamline the operation of the hotel and really is back to the heart of the operation.
Thank you, Richard. Richard, you were breaking up a little bit there, so you may want to double check on your connections there. But anyway, before we get into it, I'd like to remind everybody that they can feel free to use the Q&A and chat functions of Zoom. What we want to do is we want to hear your questions. We're going to try to get to as many as we can, but we definitely welcome the questions and just to kind of make the table larger, as it were. So let's go ahead and move to today's topic. So as mentioned, a big issue today is the labor crunch. The question really is can your PMS help here? Michael Schubach, how do you think the PMS can help hotels out in sort of the squeeze that they may be experiencing right now?
So I think we see three major thrusts in that regard. The first, most obvious, of course, is the trend that was heightened and sped along by the pandemic, which is self-service, mobile access, self-service, et cetera. So we see more and more guests who, out of health and safety concerns, or because they're just millennial and they prefer the self-service aspect of taking care of things, are moving to do as much automatically and remotely as they can, so the hotel experience is becoming, I think, sometimes less personal, which is not necessarily a good thing, but more direct. Is I arrive, I go up to my room, I let myself in, I'm in, I'm on, I'm down. We see that a lot. From the other side of the desk, what we're seeing a lot is fewer people, therefore, having to work more efficiently within the application itself. We see a trend towards self-controlled, self-automated functions. We recently had made changes to allow remote night auditing from one hotel to the next, so that one can simply staff one location instead of multiple locations and manage that. We see that in revenue management, less intervention, more automation, more self-direction on the part of the machine, more key individuals now serving multiple departments or multiple hotels. So the ability to cross-connect across the platform and do those same jobs that would have been more evenly distributed is sort of the leading trend that we're witnessing, and where most of our requests from users are coming as a result of changes to the labor force.
So it's like a kind of helping hotel groups kind of utilize more of a shared services model in order
Correct.
to kind of, that makes sense. Michael Heflin, I know StayNTouch has been at the forefront of self-service and tools like that. What's your perspective on combating the labor issue from a PMS perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic for right now, especially as you mentioned. We've sort of been in the middle of this rebound. I've had either the blessing or the curse to be traveling a lot the last 3 months or so, down in Nashville, North Carolina right now. I think really what's been unique in getting out again is actually how desperate people are to interact with people. So while I think the mobility trends, right, ease of access, user control, are trends that have been growing for a while and will continue to, what's been unique at this immediate moment in time is people really want to spend time around people again. We've been so isolated for so long. I've noticed that lobbies are more full than I'm used to because people just sort of want to hang out and be around humanity. I think that the critical piece of that then is that your technology allows for your staff to focus on providing hospitality instead of being stuck to a keyboard, sort of doing quote unquote management tasks. So really where I think it's critical from a technology perspective is that we're enabling hospitality to be provided. We're enabling staff to get out and actually be a part of the atmosphere of the hotel and really create that welcoming and warming spirit in hotels. And I think that's true. I've done corporate travel, I've done leisure travel, and it's sort of been consistent across both. I think that at the same time, the more we allow people to focus on people, that broadens our talent pool quite substantially, right? We no longer have to bring in traditional hoteliers who know the codes, know the query keys, right? Know their way around a keyboard. We can broaden to bring in anyone who wants to spend time providing service, right? In any form or fashion. You can be multifunctional, you can learn different aspects of the hotel. You can be helping, room clean 1 minute, running food the next, and checking a guest in on an iPad the minute after that. So I think that's really what's going to be critical to fighting this labor shortage, is it allows us to, view it as an opportunity to bring in a new generation of hoteliers that can train on new platforms, really with hospitality as the spirit, and sort of drifting away from management tasks and towards creating great hospitality.
Well, I know that from I would say one of the strengths of some of the new PMS companies that are coming out is improved UI, what I like to call kind of consumer quality UI, so that reduces training. And now, people always say, oh, training can be hard and you want to reduce training. As now, that used to be kind of theoretical. Now it's real, because people are really happy to bring on new people. And so the UI of your PMS is going to make a big difference in terms of your overall efficiency. So, one of the things that is unfortunately still true is that there is still a lot of hotels that are still struggling. What's interesting is there's a lot of hotels that actually had kind of weathered the storm in a relative sense a little bit better than others. And it's because that they have taken on a modified business model where they sort of like were getting revenue from using like workspaces and things of that nature, maybe like, student housing, whatever it might be. So we've seen a lot of kind of success along those lines. So I guess my question is, as we're seeing alternative models for generating revenue, we may see this in the future. And I think some of this stuff may have some sticking and staying power. I know we have some friends at a hotel called Zoku, based in Amsterdam, and they've had great success with this model. So I guess my question would be for like, Ingo, how do things like PMS inventory models deal with these alternative sort of ways of managing your hotel?
Yeah, I think so. Selling rooms or meeting spaces for a limited time, like day use rooms, this we know for a long time, right? So the PMSs normally support this for 20 years or more, especially from airport hotels, right, where you sell a room multiple times a day. But today, I think it went more into the focus of the hoteliers, because they can generate more revenue with new ideas like selling rooms as a meeting room, or for a couple of hours break during a shopping day, or for a private dining experience. What is really tricky is, and what we really need to discuss, is how revenue management systems can handle this, right? Selling or calculating prices for day use, for multiple day uses. That could be a problem.
Thank you. To that, to kind of just to expand on that, Richard, I saw a recent blog post that Mews posted about day components. How does this kind of fit into this picture that we're painting here?
Well, I think that the main, I guess, kind of paradigm shift that I think we've seen is that hotels are now actually seeing that there's a bit of brittleness basically in their kind of model. I think for the last 30 years, we've seen essentially a kind of bull market towards more open borders, greater travel. And that's essentially kind of been the wave that we've been all riding on. And I think that nobody's really kind of thought about, how to get the most out of the room. I think if you think about most occupancy models that we've actually kind of built into our PMSs, they still rely on the idea that, physical occupancy and economic occupancy of a room are exactly the same thing. So essentially you either sell the room and you have somebody there, or you don't sell the room and you have no one there. And I think that that's a model that kind of works, but basically when your entire business model is predicated on transactions and one-time transactions, basically, that you might kind of get, well, then when a pandemic hits, that essentially kind of shows the inherent weakness of that model. And I think that's why I think more and more hoteliers are looking at, how can I actually kind of, de-risk my entire kind of operation, whilst at the same time actually give a lot more optionality to the people that might want to use my services. So, you start not just being able to kind of market to just, that kind of weekday travel or weekend traveler, but you might want to actually kind of look at, local markets. For example, is there somebody who needs an office for a day? Is your space suitable to actually kind of house an office? Is there somebody who actually might want to kind of use the possibility of coming into your hotel as a kind of pied-à-terre? And could you have a kind of subscription product for them? But I think in the same way, I think that, what's really, really happening is this kind of always on culture that most consumers know. I think that's really kind of going against what, and how PMSs have actually kind of been built. So, rather famously, we don't have a specific night audit in our system, because in 2012, we thought that the whole practice was basically completely outdated, that you needed to have somebody basically at 2 o'clock that essentially shuts down the operation and runs that process. So for us, it was basically, you work on days. I think the next part is, for example, getting rid of the 3 p.m. check-in and the 11 a.m. checkout time. I think what we're going to be going is, let the guest actually choose what they want. Let the guest check in at what time they actually kind of they need, and from that perspective, figure out how much you actually kind of will charge them for those extra hours or per hour, but also think about how you can think about, making sure that the servicing and the cleaning behind, what goes on the other side is actually somehow done in a way that it's still streamlined, but it's basically to the guest satisfaction. It's not really how the PMS has been built, or what the blockers are there. But actually more geared towards the guest satisfaction, and so that the guest actually can choose, when they want to check in, how they want to check in, and what their overall kind of welcoming procedure or a checkout procedure actually kind of looks like from that perspective. And I think it's mainly kind of time for us as PMS companies to basically kind of stop being in the middle and preventing for that type of thing from happening.
Well, I think it's interesting because if you take an owner's perspective, which sometimes we don't like to do, but like at the end of the day, they have a real estate investment. They're maximizing the revenue per square foot or square meter or whatever you want to call it. It's about maximizing the revenue. Your job is to run a business that maximizes as much as possible the revenue out of that real estate investment. So I think that in lean times, or maybe even in fat times, you're going to have to the more competitive owners are going to be pushing for a maximization of those kinds of opportunities. Michael Heflin, I see that you have your virtual hand up. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think that the point that Richard made is very timely, and it's forcing some weird discussion in even the way that we use terminology, right? So we historically as an industry think about things in terms of occupancy and ADR. Well, RevPar, if you sell hourly, doesn't equal occupancy plus ADR anymore, right? So it's sort of forcing us to like really even reconsider the way that we talk about the investment strategy. I think, StayNTouch is unique in being built on 24-hour blocks of inventory. It's worked that way since day one. It's kind of been a hard thing to actually take advantage of because the ecosystem itself isn't built for it. But even literally just the way we talk about selling hotel rooms has not historically been built around the ability to be more flexible in room assignment. And so, we try to create a term of rev per available room hour instead of per available room. No one wants to have that discussion yet, but I think it's great that we are, because that is definitely where the industry is going. And we're going to need new language and new terminology and new metrics to be able to manage that world, right? Right now, we run occupancy over 100% in a bunch of our hotels. That doesn't make sense on a report, but it's somewhere we are, watching the industry go.
Interesting. Michael Schubach, did you have your non-virtual hand up?
Yeah, my real hand up. It's interesting because when you look at day parts and you have that analysis, because we've seen over the years too, there was, in particular, you see it in, I typically saw it in large international airport service areas where the off schedule arrival time and departure time, to Richard's point, is something that's very difficult for a lot of people to deal with. And yet, if you are selling in a day unit, which is to say, unless you go to partial day, it's very hard for you to be able to actually look at future availabilities and have them be reliable about check-in times and arrival times for conventional guests. And it's also very hard to say, well, if I give you a 24-hour access to the room and you arrive at 2 a.m. and I'm trying to maximize revenue per square unit per hour type thing, then it sort of implies that I'm certainly going to turn that room at 2 a.m. and re-rent it at 3:30 or 4 a.m., which may or may not actually make sense. And so I have a creeping departure time by room throughout the hotel rather than a fixed day point. And so it does cause you to have to look at that. And those were pre-pandemic issues as well. But it causes you to look at it from a different perspective. But at the end of the day, you sort of have to come around to, how do I standardize so I can do year-over-year comparison, day over day, week over week. I have to not use floating points in time at some moment to create a system of record. So I can say, here's how my performance is moving, trending, going up and down. So it's kind of a combination between a new style of flexibility that still has to, in a lot of accounting and financial senses, has to observe old models at the same time. So
Yeah.
I see it as sort of a competitive.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and you bring up like the airport model, and certainly that is something that they are been managing or dealing with at least for a few years now. Yas, I figured you would have something to say about this. So you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think that the revenue side is obviously the interesting part of this for most hoteliers and owners, and that's probably, I would say, also the easiest part to achieve, because you can sell it, but then you have to fulfill it. And I think I'm curious about how you guys as PMS vendors are thinking about it in the future, because I think the flexibility of arriving early or staying late is key for many customers, especially in transit areas. But also leisure people prefer to stay as long as they can around or have access to their room. So how do you guys? Because like on ROOMDEX, we sell early arrival and late departure, and we figured out a way to kind of ensure we can make it available, or it's available. But how is the PMS thinking about, if you like go beyond the standard check-in time or the standard check-out time, how can you ensure that rooms are available? What sort of housekeeping processes, thoughts are going on in your development area at this point in time to kind of cater for that? Anybody who wants to answer?
I'm happy to. We really kind of like think about this and talk about this a lot. I would just maybe first off I think to set the discussion, I think the reason why, for example, airport hotels have needed to figure this out is they have a very strange local market. I think that most hotels don't really look at their local market per se. They look at basically their incoming market. And in airports, what you kind of see is that you both have an incoming market and a kind of local market, basically. That's very, very strange. And from that perspective, that's why the different hours are kind of there. I think what ends up happening is basically that the 3 p.m. check-in, I look at as that's a very crude form of data science, because you're kind of choosing an hour that works with the schedules of housekeepers, the schedules of the hotel, the schedules of, let's say, a lot of flights, especially for business travelers, and roughly it's a mnemonic basically that you're kind of putting it more or less at the middle of the day, or towards the end of the day, when it should be attractive for most people to actually kind of check in. And then from that perspective, you're kind of looking at early check-in as anything before 3 p.m. and late checkout as anything after 11 a.m. And I think that's just, it's a really, really good attempt at how to kind of think about this from a data scientific point of view. But I think in the age when we can actually kind of know this information, when, through self-serve tools, customers are happy to actually kind of share this information, it's actually it's a problem of us as technology vendors not being able to kind of think through this properly, to say, okay, well, if somebody is actually kind of coming in at let's say 7 a.m., what do I need to kind of make sure that I'm doing on the back end, or organizing my workforce around the fact that I want to actually kind of fulfill that request of helping them actually kind of check in at 8 a.m. And from that perspective, it really, really helps when the system is allowed to actually kind of do that. And you're not waiting for, a 10 a.m. process of room assignment and things like that. You really have to actually kind of let the technology take the lead in this. And, and you have to think about it from a self-serve perspective. Give the power to the actual customer. They will figure out, what time they actually kind of want to check in. And if there's a service fee or something like that, that basically kind of, thinks about the price, I think that's really kind of the cherry on the cake. But I think the fundamental shift that I think most technology companies have to kind of make is to say, 3 p.m. is unnatural, 11 a.m. is also unnatural. It's a good attempt at data science, but it's basically kind of against the idea of what good guest experience should actually kind of look like. And I think that if we're happy to kind of say that as technology companies, then I think that comes the second much harder part of how do we configure our systems so that they can orchestrate the entire kind of workforce to make sure that those types of requests are actually kind of carried out in a timely manner, and so that the actual kind of operation of the hotel works in a way that seems normal. And I think it goes back to this to this point as well of I think that the pandemic has really kind of, I think to us, basically represents a paradigm shift in terms of how hoteliers think about the work that they're doing. And I think that, it does represent a way for you to look at the productivity of your own workforce, to look at the SOPs that you might have basically drawn up and to say, well, isn't there a way that we could actually create more productivity, more time with the guests, and actually kind of really, really focus on that guest experience of leaving them in control of the experience that they want. And I think the revenue part basically, and the revenue management aspect of it, I think that almost kind of comes last, because that's the cherry on the cake, basically. I think that most customers are willing to actually pay for a better guest experience in general.
Sounds like you're making a good case for automated room assignment. I would say. Michael Schubach, did you have something to say?
Yeah, no, that's exactly where I was going with it, is that I think that when you look at this and there is this idea that Richard, you're correct. There's just the physical aspect of getting a guest into a room, and it is a combination of required pre-services plus anticipated arrival time. And then so the nothing magic about 3 o'clock. It just sort of works for most people, and it's traditional, doesn't make it right. It just makes it average. Now the question really is if 3 o'clock doesn't work for me, then what? So so rather than let's just let it be anything for anybody, the question really is if it doesn't fit the standard normal model for which we staff and anticipate, then what do I do? So as Yo said, we can pre-sell, we can sell early arrival in a high demand market. That's a great thing to do. In a low demand market, what's the alternative? What am I going to do? Am I going to have that guest sit in the lobby until 3 o'clock because I'm just not going to let you upstairs until then? Well, of course not. We're going to accommodate an early arrival. And the question is, now, can I know that? Can I know that information? If I could tell you sequentially at check-in what time every guest was going to arrive that day, what type of room and accommodation has either been selected or is planned for their usage, and automatically pre-assign that instead of going off of static room attendant assignments, that if I had the ability to dynamically take the staff, and sometimes there are labor issues around this, so notwithstanding labor unions or the cost of this, is that I should be able to take my entire inventory that's going to be in use that night. I should be able to stack rank it by arrival time. I should be able to assign cleaning by arrival time. I should be able to have rooms ready as people are anticipated. And if I did let's say a 24-hour advanced check-in like most airlines offer all of their passengers today, and we're able to use a single guest itinerary to link air transportation to hotel transportation, figuring average travel time in between, et cetera, I get a pretty good model of what time people are going to walk through the door. And if I know what time they're going to walk through the door, there is absolutely no reason on earth that I shouldn't be able to accommodate that, short of a full house turn in a massive house. So,
well, I mean, I think people are trying to do that. I think that hotels, when I've been on a few places where you book and they ask you, when your flight is getting in, so I think there's a manual attempt at that at the very least.
Right, but I think that ideally that would be fully automated, that we would know a guest itinerary, we would know purpose of travel, we would know arrival time and arrival method. We would know those things and be able to apply that to be able to come up with, this is how it would be most efficient for you. And same with departure. I think the only reason we adhere to these normal models is because if someone says, how many rooms are you going to have available on Christmas Eve? I kind of have to know when that day is going to start and what the demand for that day is in order to be able to answer that question in the traditional sense. But there's no reason why we shouldn't be taking advantage of new automation and service dispatch and service optimization in order to be able to accommodate the ultimate variations that people will come up with. Not that we don't have that revenue opportunity as well. We can always charge for those premium services.
Well, so I feel like we could have a whole other webinar dedicated to this topic. And Michael Heflin,
yes, we could.
I'm going to let you have the last word on this before we move forward.
Yeah, all I wanted to add is, you brought up earlier the benefit of sort of intuitive UIs and simplicity of actually leveraging the PMS to facilitate this sort of optimum guest experience. And I think really that's kind of the biggest thing we've learned through all of this is, one, and I'll just use myself as an example, I'm wrong about what time I'm going to check in basically every single time. So I think that collecting information on guest intent is a very good thing. I think designing your hotel operations around guest intent is not a good thing because we're usually wrong. But I think that what it's really taught us is the value and importance of having a system that is very flexible and allows you to sort of adapt as is needed. So that if you do get a room rush, it's very easy to assign cleaners, make sure that you're turning the right rooms over at the right amount of time, right? So really having a system that allows you to be adaptive and responsive is going to be critical. The more data we can gather, and we gather this data, this check-in data on every single guest that comes through, the more data, the better. The more we can look at what trends look like over time in terms of when people are arriving and departing. Of course, we want to use that data, but I think the best thing we can be is hospitality focused and adaptive and flexible. And the more that our systems continue to evolve in that direction, the better that will be for guests and for staff ability to respond to guest needs.
Yeah, I would agree. Just to remind our audience, if you have any questions, I'm not sure today if we'll get to a lot of questions because we've have a vigorous conversation going on. But please use the Q&A or the chat, and we'll try to get to them. So Uli, I want to turn to you. We had a conversation in which you had pointed out that you saw something or maybe this is your own data, that technology-focused hotels, however you want to define that, have actually been running higher occupancies than traditional hotels, and I would say non-technology focused hotels during the pandemic. And so I'd love you to expand on this. Is this because of distribution? Is it because of automation? How has technology specifically given certain hotels the edge? And how might this continue to apply as we move forward?
Sure. I mean, we all have seen the pandemic kick in over a year ago, and essentially that changed the industry in many ways radically during that period. And if we look how travel will develop over the coming years, I think there will be lots of changes, how traveler will do their trips, how they will book, how they'll check in, how they'll use technology and so on. So on the traveler side and user side, there are radical changes happening. And the same applies obviously to the technology companies and the hotels using those technologies. And so one trend we have seen is that actually, obviously, as said before, people want to become more digital in terms of how they use technology platforms and apps connected to those platforms, but as well for accommodation providers to become much more agile and dynamic on how they sell their inventory. And what I mean with this is the typical old style of selling hotel rooms is not more what it is today. There are lots of things and market segments that are changing dramatically, like a lot of the fairs will go away, will not happen as they happened in the past. Business travel will change radically. And obviously this puts a lot of new requirements on the technology companies and the platforms. So the accommodation providers have to do several things. First of all, they have to be more dynamic in the way how they use technology. So switching apps, trying out new apps, migrating to modern technologies has to become much more self-sufficient. And this is something we put a lot of focus on, and we see from a lot of those successful accommodation providers today that they want to be in self-control 100%. So the entire onboarding and how they test apps and connect apps, that all needs to be in hands of the customers. And the second thing is we have seen a lot of successful accommodation companies, hotel companies over here coming onto the markets with new concepts. And when they start their tech-driven concepts, what they want to do is they want to be able to use platforms where they can do their own developments on. So it's not about only choosing apps that are available in the market and that drive the innovation, but they also want to be in the control of developing own things like revenue systems or digital guest journeys or other pieces of technology on top of platforms. So I think the technology providers have to become much more agile in terms of how these platforms are being provided and what functionalities and features they offer, especially in allowing third parties to connect and allowing people to do their own developments on top of platforms.
So, I would say that you were saying that essentially because of the ability to kind of plug and play a variety of different things, test and try things, those are giving the technology focused hotels a little bit of the edge. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. It drives their efficiency through automation. They can do whatever they want. They can put their own concepts in place. And if they are not happy with an app or a certain piece of technology, they should be just switching to something new, testing it out without a big hassle. So for me, rather than looking at the traditional type of PMS environment that is in control of innovation and technology, it should be platforms that are driving that and be able to connect all kinds of apps to those platforms. So in other words, imagine you had an iPhone and you were running an Apple environment on your iPhone. So the Apple system is the platform, and based upon this platform, you should be able to use, connect, install, deinstall any of the apps that are available to do exactly what you want to do as a user.
That's a fair model, Michael Heflin. I'll move to you. One of the things that's interesting is that on my Apple phone, I use mostly the native apps on there for most of the time. So what do you think the StayNTouch perspective is?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of has to be room for both of these. I worry about this in all technology industries, right? And a big part of my personal background is in technology consulting. And I think people get very tied up in wanting to use the latest and greatest, almost from a toys or hobby perspective, as opposed to is this actually adding to my functionality, right? And again, like, you have to define what that means. When I started my career in data consulting, data and information are two very different things. You can extract information from data, but data is not information by itself, right? And so it's really key as you look at your ecosystem for tools, features, et cetera, that you've got a very clear definition of where you're trying to go. What am I actually trying to accomplish, right? Am I evaluating this on a RevPar basis? Okay, then I need to be able to make sure that as I institute new functionality, new features, et cetera, I can tie that directly to an increase in my RevPar, right? So I think we have to start with a very clear definition of what success means, and then we've got to hold ourselves accountable for meeting that definition. I think in a lot of cases, people will find that, like, the phrase "there's elegance in simplicity" is a real thing. The greatest, most elegant solution is the easiest one. I think sometimes, we think that it looks good to stack 37 tools on top of each other. I think we really should be looking much more at discernible outcomes and how we build towards discernible outcomes. So we want an ecosystem that allows you the flexibility to try and test and implement different configurations, different tools, different functions. We think it's important you be able to build on top of ours and to be able to add and partner with the best in the industry. But ultimately, all of that is only useful if we've really defined what success looks like and are holding ourselves accountable for achieving that success. And I think that, hoteliers are getting much smarter about that. Certainly, in the distribution space, coming from a revenue management background, everyone chased every single available distribution avenue and very quickly realized that the distribution companies were now running their hotels, not them. So I think we've seen a nice walk back from that. I think we'll start to see that in terms of the industry as a whole. People defining which of these tools actually add value and being able to factually illustrate how they're adding value and really focus in those critical areas. And that's where we want to live, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's fair to say, kind of RevPar is king when you're looking at what you want to do to add to your technology stack. Ingo, do you have something to say about this?
I just wanted to say that it's an amazing, the marketplaces all the vendors have today are really amazing. So trying out products is a great idea. But I think we should not forget, like the Apple iPhone, the essentials should be built into the PMS, into the core, right? So we should have the core hotel functionality should always be in the PMS and not provided by an add-on, right? So and we are also responsible for support and maintaining the product, right? So if an essential feature, let's say housekeeping or whatever, cannot be done anymore because the external vendor has some problems or goes bankrupt or whatever, then it's us having to help the hotel, right? So the basics should be really in the PMS, and for the rest, it's amazing to have open APIs and playing around with other apps and integrate as many vendors as possible, but don't forget about the essentials.
Well, Richard, so who's to say what the essentials are, right? Is housekeeping an essential? What's essential and what's not essential, I guess.
You're on mute, Richard.
I think you're still a little bit muted there.
Sorry. I was just putting my hand down and I forgot to unmute myself. I think that it changes, right? Like I think when we started, we were the first to basically publish our API, and like that wasn't a standard. You look around all of the companies basically that are here, everyone's API first, everyone basically does all of these kind of things. It just becomes a new normal, and we don't need to kind of like talk about it anymore because it's basically something that's baked into the PMSs basically that we have today. It's the same thing, for example, the guest journey. Again, there wasn't a time when somebody thought that the guest journey should be built into the PMS. Now it's completely standard. Yeah, I think it's the same thing with housekeeping. If you don't have some kind of basic rudimentary housekeeping module, is your PMS basically actually kind of managing that? And I think that that's great. I think it's great to have, a lot of these different concepts that are kind of coming around that essentially kind of redefine what is that kind of standard package for a hotelier. And then, as Uli was saying, I think it's great to then have the possibility to basically have someone, it's the same thing with an iPhone. Yeah, if you don't want to use the iPhone, calendar, yeah, you can use a different one, but it just comes straight out of the pack, basically, that it's a calendar there, because a lot of people just want a basic calendar and they kind of look to Apple as the provider, as basically kind of, giving that basic starter pack, basically, that they want, and then give the hotelier the freedom to actually kind of integrate whatever service that they want. If they want it a slightly different flavor, if they want to build it themselves, all of these kind of things. But I think to Michael's point, I think that that's a really, really important one. At the end of the day, what are we actually kind of doing? And I think we have to kind of, ask ourselves, are we actually in some ways helping the hotelier? Are we arbiters of, what is good and what is not? Are we helping the hotelier actually kind of benchmark their own performance? Are we informing them that something that they're actually kind of plugging in is better or worse performing than a similar type of property? And I think those are the types of things that a PMS absolutely, my thought, it has to do, because if we aren't, because we are the main partner to the hotel, and I think that that's why we sit in a really, really privileged position to the hotelier. We help them really kind of run that business and run the operations basically that they have towards the main goal, which is, you know, enhancing the guest experience and that kind of guest relationship that you actually kind of have. We're not some kind of, you know, back-end system that kind of takes a step back and just kind of says like, okay, well, you know, here's all of these other apps basically and all of these other different types of services that will somehow do my work for me. No, we're proactive, we're forward-facing applications that actually kind of, you know, take a step towards helping the hotelier actually solve some of their biggest problems. And also in time, we can help them actually kind of maximize their own performance. And I think that philosophically for me is what a PMS actually kind of does. It's not anonymous. It's an active force within the hotel's operation.
Jas, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to add on what Richard said, and also following a question that's on the chat window, where it said that small independent hotels still need, you know, they don't have the know-how. They still need somebody that provides them with the basics. So I think kind of what Richard says, it's still important that it's really important that you provide flexibility and that you can allow people that want to do whatever they want to do. But I think it's really key that the PMS, and Ingo said that as well, still provides the core for hotels that don't want to or don't have the skill set to add whatever they want to add to run their basics. I mean, I think it's really key. You know, taking Richard's example of the calendar is an important example. Take that back to rate management or inventory. It has to run somewhere. The basics have to run somewhere, and I think the PMS is still core for the basics in any hotel today. That's how I'm looking at it.
So, since this has been a very active and vigorous topic, I'd like to kind of go back around the table to Michael and get Michael Schubach's perspective on this, and then I want to give Uli the last word because he kind of opened it up the beginning salvo on this conversation and let him have the concluding remarks on it.
Well, I think the sum up is we're all sort of very much violently in agreement, but it's the idea is that there has to be, I think, a standard, a basic, as the question was, what does the small independent do if he doesn't want to rewrite the rule book? But there has to be the flexibility. I agree. This is not general ledger accounting. We are not just simply debiting and crediting. We are managing a guest experience, and so we're catering to psychological needs and creature comforts and anticipations, and we're trying to be all things to all people, and that is the ideal answer. But I think it has to start within a mold. You'll see the first question in the chat window is, okay, so a guest is arriving at 7 a.m. How is the rest of the house going to react to me servicing rooms at 5 and 6 a.m. in preparation for a 7 a.m. arrival? And we're going to say that's probably not going to go down well. In the effort to make the next stay more enjoyable and more personalized, we're going to mess up the end of the current stay for the guests who are in-house. So we're probably not going to do that. It's not, am I going to get you in at 7:01 a.m.? It's how am I best going to be able to accommodate you in the context of accommodating everyone who comes to my hotel. Let me get you in by 8:15 instead of 3 p.m. You know, so I can make it better and I can flex to get there, but I still have to be working. I have to start with something. So we have to use building blocks, and then we have to figure, when do we throw them out? When do we go around them? When do we stack them up high? How do we make this work? And I think that is ultimately the riddle that needs to be solved.
So Uli, I feel like we're kind of talking a little bit about like what is the soul of the future PMS.
I have a very clear statement on this. We don't believe in the PMS being the holder of all of that. Yes, the core PMS functionality needs to be somewhere as usual. So check-in, check-out, reservations, inventory, payment, all of these things need to be available for anybody to be used. However, from my perspective, the PMS approach, having it sitting in the PMS is just the old-fashioned way, and we would not do it going forward. We think all of this functionality needs to be sitting in an open platform, and anybody can access this information in a user interface or in an app in any way they want. And for me, the PMS of the future is just a very lean app that uses the functionality from the platform that it needs. But all of the innovation, or most of the innovation, doesn't come from us, from people that deliver those functionalities. It comes from new apps on the market, like ROOMDEX and others, that do upsell, that do early check-in, early check-out, CRM, BI functionality, whatever they do, but they do it connected to a platform where all of this core PMS functionality sits. And for me, it's actually a misconception if we say we have all API first. That is not the real thing, because API first, when you read about this technology, it's actually developing the API platform first and then have apps accessing this API platform. What we have done in the past is developing PMSs first and the functionality in the PMSs, and then we put open APIs and interfaces and integrations on top of the PMS. That is not the same thing as an API first platform, because API first means you always put it into the platform first before it gets used by any of the apps or PMS user interface or whatever out there.
Well, thank you.
Would you mind if I just responded to that, Paul?
So I just want to say that we have 8 minutes left, and so I want to be very conscious of the time that we have here. What I'd like to do is give everyone a final opportunity to speak. We had when an attendee say, "I run a small independent hotel and would like to change my PMS, and I do not know where to start." So what I want to do is I want to kind of combine a response to that particular hotelier with this kind of a perspective on, when I listen to Uli and like some of the counterpoints, I'm thinking there are a lot of different kinds of hotels out there. There's a lot of different levels of sophistication out there. The good news is that there's the right PMS for your hotel, because there's a variety of approaches. I don't think that it's fair to say that, given 14-room bed and breakfasts and giant Marriott chains, is that we can make very broad brush statements about anything. But so what I'd like to do is say, as an advice to listeners with returning guests who need more automation in order to make some more efficiencies, how do these hotels, you've opened a bunch of people's eyes here in this talk. How to put hotels, how should they proceed from this point? And Richard, I'll let you start with that.
So I think it's exactly that kind of iPhone approach, and I think what Uli is describing there is basically the antithesis to the iPhone approach, because the iPhone is not a light app, basically, or a light system. It's actually the ecosystem that creates something that just works. So it isn't then up to the hotelier to basically kind of figure out, how do I program this? How do I do this? And if you're not, you can take that approach, basically, that you're a bedrock, API layer, basically, that's letting other apps do your product management basically for you, and that you have no real kind of view on what product is best for the hotelier. I think if you are, a small hotelier, but also the largest hotelier, you're looking at, how do I serve my guest? And you're looking for a partner that can actually help you do that. So whether they're kind of saying, this is how you use our apps or our kind of, ecosystem that we have built, or this is the type of ecosystem that works really, really well for your segment, for your region, for your market, or you're kind of looking at it as saying, this particular problem that you have, if you're, a large multinational chain, and you're looking at it from the perspective of, I really want to do this, but I don't see a solution for this. How would you actually kind of partner up with me to think about, how can we actually kind of do this better? And I think that's really the kind of the approach that I think that again, Android takes this approach that it's very much a kind of light system. You can configure it in whichever way you want. But Apple takes this very kind of deliberate way of kind of saying, this is the standard. This is what we think really, really works for a great hotelier like you. And then you basically kind of build on that with a large number of apps. But then they also have the Genius Bar and that kind of service that then essentially kind of enables you to do the really, really cool stuff basically on top of it. And the highest is when you're actually kind of a developer, doing something with that entire kind of platform itself. And I think that the point is, for me, is that as technology vendors, we need to basically be able to satisfy all those different parts. But I think that the model that hoteliers are used to is really that kind of iPhone model, rather than the Android model, where everyone kind of has to like spend a lot of time trying to actually kind of configure all of these things themselves, basically.
Ingo, can I go to you next?
Mm-hmm. I think it's the iPhone is a good example, right? I guess that 90% of the users are using the built-in apps, right? So if you look at your mom and dad and people which are not so tech savvy, they use the standard apps. They use the standard mail system or a browser, the Safari browser on the iPhone. And then if you have the experts, or let's say people who really have a goal and want to use a specific product, a specific app on the iPhone, then they go to the App Store and download something different. But I really think a product like a PMS should have the basic features built in, and it makes the PMS, right? So the features and the workflows built into the PMS, that was thousands of hours of work, right? Which went into the PMS. And this is how the workflows in the systems are created, and this is making up the PMS itself. So I think building a PMS from other products in a kind of Lego, it's nice to have it for add-ons, and it's amazing to have the connectivity to any other product. But I think really the iPhone model should also be the PMS model.
Michael Schubach, what are your concluding remarks on this topic?
I'll go quickly. I think in this age of guest experience, emphasis on guest experience and unique travelers, and even unique persona, meaning I might have a different list of needs traveling on business as I would on pleasure, and I would expect different levels of service. So you look at it as this ultimately. Even the guest is a variable, the hotel, every hotel is a variable, every season is a variable, every day is something of a variable. It sort of cries out for, there is an overarching AI need that someday we will be able to reconcile these things to be more like all things to all people. But in the meantime, and I think the other panelists are making this point, is there has to be enough flexibility today in what we do to accommodate at least these multiple points of entry, different styles of achieving these things. What works for me is not going to be ideal for the millennial or even my fellow, baby boomer travelers. This is me, this is my day, this is how I am, how I feel, what I want today. It's not what I wanted yesterday, and it may not be what I want tomorrow. And you have to help me figure this out and let me do it as much my way as humanly possible. So flexibility is the issue, but it has to be built around, I think, something of a predefined base to at least to start. Why are we here? What do we do? What are we responsible for delivering, and how do we do that in a way that pleases everyone?
Thanks. I would agree. Thank you. Michael Heflin, what are your parting words here on this topic?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I kind of want to bring it back to the question itself, right? Which is, if I'm a hotelier that's starting the journey for picking a PMS, where am I going? I think one of the things that's been fleshed out in this conversation is the most successful hotels and hoteliers sort of know exactly what they are, and then pick a system that empowers their ability to sort of deliver that authenticity, right? So I think that is what I would suggest, right? Don't start with the PMS. Start with what your vision is for what you want your hotel and your hospitality experience to look like, and then pick the system that best enables you to deliver that hospitality experience, right? Like, every one of us wants the answer to be us, but that's sort of secondary to like making sure that what you're actually doing is delivering your vision for what your specific hospitality experience can be. And that even comes down to like, maybe you don't do 8 a.m. check-ins, right? But what you can do is communicate ahead of time. Hey, you're going to be here at 8. I would love to host you for tea, but your room's not going to be ready till 1, right? But what makes you unique is you communicate that ahead of time. You give them a plan. You recommend things they can go do in the neighborhood, right? It's all about defining exactly what you want to be as a hotelier, and then finding a system that really empowers that vision. I think you've got a lot of great options here. I think the key is actually understanding exactly what you want to be, and then partnering with someone that can help you fulfill that vision.
So thank you. So Uli, I think that you would agree that it's like, the great thing about hotel technology today is that you can craft your guest experience uniquely with the help of technology. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is absolutely the key to it, and make it as simple and as straightforward for everybody to be used. So I think as hotel technology companies with modern technology, we should actually motivate any user to go out and try it by himself. So go to wherever you can, test it in a live environment, connect apps, and see how far you can get with kind of the PMS functionality, the apps around it, the digital guest journey, and so on. And if people are serious about their technology, actually that all should work today in a live environment, and everybody should, in a self-service mode, be able to test it. So I would motivate anybody who's interested in modern technology to go to all of the companies that are present here and test it by themselves.
Yeah, do your research. I would agree with that 100%. Yas, as always, I want to give you the last word on this panel.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything has been said already, so I don't have to add too much to that. But I think one thing I would like to comment on top of what Michael Heflin said is about hotels should decide what they want to do. I do think hotels should take really in consideration and put themselves in the shoes of the guest, because often, or not often, but hotels sometimes are run the way the hotel wants to run them, and sometimes they forget what the guest actually wants. So if I arrive at 8 a.m., I probably want to get to my room at 8 a.m. And they should be finding ways to accommodate that. So that's one. I think it's important to keep the guests ultimately on the foreground. And second, I think, if you're looking for a PMS solution, make sure the solution can provide, and this goes on to what Uli says, can provide trial opportunities that do not require you to pay an arm and a leg for a licensed interface for that third party to connect to that PMS, because that kind of eliminates every opportunity to try anything up front. So besides from being very open when it comes to APIs, also make sure that the PMS you select is commercially very open. I think that you should take in consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I think the takeaway I have overall today is that flexibility is key. And if you're, as we are meeting and going into the recovery, and we have more guests and we have certain constraints, technology flexibility is going to provide a way out for your hotel and give you a competitive edge. I want to thank all of my panelists here today. This was a great discussion. I can't wait to do it again, perhaps in the fall. As usual, this webinar has been recorded, and we will upload it to the ROOMDEX website later today. And each of you will receive an email with the link as well. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us at info@roomdex.io. Thanks everybody for all the participants and all the panelists. Thanks very much.
Thanks everyone, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.